7 and limestone montage about preamble to the Constitution.
Oh,
This is fabulous.
okay, well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Energy Resilience and Efficiency Working Group members. Some of us joining online today, some of us joining us this morning from beautiful Greenbelt, Maryland at the Greenbelt Community Center. Thank you, everyone who is able to make this meeting. Now, we'll turn it over to Stephanie Vo for roll call of the working group members.
You think your microphone in your left capture?
Can we be heard online?
Thumbs up if everyone can hear us online. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
Wait, I'll just go through.
Present.
Yeah.
Present.
Delegate Lori Sharkey. Andrew Place,
Present.
Landon Farrig,
Present.
Maurice Simpson, Christine Sismadia, Carol Lane, Jeff Shaw, Nancy Sopko, and Mark Sukkot.
Present. Hi. Thank you very much. All right, so this is Andrew Place. Yeah, thanks everyone for those who are able to be here today. It is fabulous to do these field trips. I think there's real value in coming into communities we don't often come into. With that said, all right, so on the study, and there's been a lot of churn the last couple of weeks, and I've had a lot of conversations with a number of you on the one-on-one. So really we need to think about that what's the statutory requirement for that study? And there was there are 5 questions laid out in the statute. And then we've also had this whole very varied and complicated or diverse conversation about scenario planning and using the model for running scenarios. So I really want us to be clear that those two are quite delineated. Those are quite distinct. I've had conversations with UND, I've had conversations with the folks at Johns Hopkins, and they are back on track on delivering what the requirement is, what that statute tells them to answer. And we've agreed to push the deadline for the final deliverable to December 9th from November 15th. But I'm fully committed that is going to be delivered and it's going to be complete and it's going to answer those questions. It's not going to go down the rabbit holes of model results, running any specific scenario. That is version 2.0. That's what we should be doing in this year ahead. And that's also what we are going to have to fund. We're going to have to fund separately. That's not going to fall under the existing contract that UMD and Johns Hopkins produced this study from. So partly this is on me that I was at a different meeting on the last time we talked a couple weeks ago. But we all are clear that what they're going to be delivering is the narrative answers to those questions. It's not going to have any of the what I think Senator Hester referred to as the dangerous stuff, the suicidal stuff to put in there. It's not going to be reporting results of any modeling run. The model might appear in the answers to the question to illustrate its power or what it can answer. But those questions are answerable. Some of them were already answered in the narrative that Johns Hopkins presented to us 2 weeks ago as a draft. But as I noted, they are going back and fleshing that out. Each one of those questions is going to be a chapter heading, and underneath that chapter is going to be the answer to that question, no more, no less.
Can you say what the questions are? Because I feel like I've gotten lost in that Because I think the concern that I have, which I actually think could be very dangerous and could set all of us back, is I think that if one of the questions is,
Can you enlarge that or?
See,
Or we can enlarge that.
let me get that real quick. Nope, that's trying to find the margin thing usually,
Or opening a different tab.
maybe.
Or if you want to share.
I can try it on my end. Yeah.
those questions are not, from what I can see, I can't really see them. They're not really, they have nothing to do with the model itself, the ones that I.
Really? Yeah, exactly.
So I think if we're gonna answer those questions and not have a model, what I think is dangerous about the model as it currently stands, or is the analysis that we looked at, is that without any policymaker actually articulating what 100% clean or decarbonization looks like, assumptions just got made. And even if those assumptions are written down, they produce a model that nobody has actually proposed that will absolutely be used to bury every climate bill any of us are trying to move forward this year. So, and that's what I'm pushing back against. I'm saying if you want to say decarbonization, then we need to say exactly what we need, and it's got to be vaguely related to something that someone's proposed, not something that somebody at Hopkins thought we might have thought about proposing. And so if you're saying we're pulling back, we're not going to have a model producing anything, we're just going to talk about these things, which I'm still having trouble reading, then we can talk about that and what that means. But I can't open it. I'm like trying to make sure I can read. I'm just kidding.
Do you want me to enlarge it further?
No, I got it. Yeah, as long as we stop.
Yeah.
But I think that the danger is that we had, so I think I've made my point about the model as it currently stands and what we looked at a few days ago. And if you want to write a study about possibilities to encourage electric storage technology, that's fine. If we want a study of the security of the grid, that's fine. If we want a study of how grid distribution transformation projects, thank you, I really appreciate that. Any of these studies, I think is fine. I think that my warning and my caution, and I will absolutely, to the extent I have a vote on this body, vote against putting out what I saw 2 weeks ago. So if you want to just limit it to this and not run models at this point in time, I think that's fine. But I think just because I think that model, as it was produced, as it was run, takes us, backwards in terms of the potential to solve a problem in the next legislative session.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I was arguing, that we're drawing back to the beginning. We're drawing back to what within the four corners of what the statute asked the study to do. And that's right here, no more, no less. And the conversation about model or using the model to illustrate policy choices, policy scenarios, absolutely. That's version 2.0. That doesn't belong in here at all. Nowhere, no how should that appear in this study that the legislature asked us to produce, or asked to be produced. This is narrative. This is not going to go down any single scenario. So your concern is alleviated. They're limited to simply the four corners of these 5 or 6 questions.
I don't know how helpful that will be, but at least it won't be damaging. So I can live with that.
When do we expect the initial draft of the study?
Yuri or Ben, we talked about a deliverable of the final by December 9th. Do you have an interim?
So our goal here is,
Can't hear you, Yuri.
Oh, I apologize. Can you hear me better now?
It's on our end.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that's on our end, your end.
All right. I'll try to speak a little louder. So the goal is that, first of all, last time we shared the draft, I believe 8 days before the tentative deadline for preliminary sharing, 3 weeks before the deadline of November 15th. So this time we would like to be a little bit more conservative, and we're not going to share the entire deadline way ahead of time. We're going to share it around December 9th with a small group of people, maybe a little bit earlier, to give their feedback. Then we're going to incorporate this feedback, and sometime after that, we're going to share a more detailed, refined draft with the entire group. The reason for that is being that we feel a lot of things are being missed in translation, and before we share it with the big group, we want to make sure that we communicate everything properly. I also would like to suggest that we're not going to run scenario building. We're not going to define what decarbonization is. For example, the first bullet point, method for state to encourage electricity technology research. What is going to be there? It's going to be a qualitative discussion of how, in general, storage technology can be helpful in the power grid and why it is important to use models to understand their specific value. And we're going to try to formalize what this value is. The second bullet point, it's also going to be very qualitative rather than quantitative. We're going to discuss how energy storage, whether by itself or with synergistic technologies, distributed energy resources, can help boost resiliency of critical loads. We're not going to run experiments and simulations trying to say that it's going to improve resiliency or reliability by X percentages, which is going to outline mechanisms that this could work, and we're going to identify groups of customers or critical loads that could benefit from it. We are going to get a little bit more numerical when we're going to talk about the potential to develop clean energy resources on previously developed project sites. We're going to list those sites. UMD shared data with us. We're going to say whether they're suitable for a particular type of renewable. So, for example, site X has square area of Z, and that could potentially accommodate a amount of solar power, for example, right? We're going to have the lifespan availability of energy facilities analysis. So there is like a number of bullet points: solar, nuclear, wind, geothermal, hydro, biofuel. Here we're going to be numerical in a sense that we're going to provide a survey of costs and lifespan estimates, how long these technologies can live. We're going to discuss here physical versus economic obsolescence, which is an important factor moving forward. So in that sense, there's going to be some numbers towards the later bullet points, but it's not going to be numbers that are either attached to particular decarbonization scenarios or to a particular definition of decarbonization or to numerical models. And we had a meeting yesterday with our entire group. We discussed how to proceed forward across the lines that I described. We've got one more question that we need to look into regarding the potential electric grid distribution transformation projects. And with that, we will reach out to you, Andrew, maybe in a day or two when we exhaust our own resources to analyze that problem. And we hope to get your feedback and proceed with that task. Thank you.
Yeah, and Yuri. Thanks. Yeah, and the email that you and I exchanged on last week on November 8th, you noted in the plan that the final deliverable was December 9th.
Yeah, I think that's the plan, but like, we're gonna open it for commenting, right? And I think one of the things that needs to be clear is that previously we shared a draft of a draft, and we shared it too early, and yeah, we would like to avoid this mistake. So we wouldn't like to send something for general awareness and then potentially be in a position when it's too hard to build consensus around this report. And I think I did say that we will target as early completion as possible, but we'll keep December 9th as more or less our target final. You're right.
Yeah, and not to be difficult, but that's a hard deadline. That's
Okay.
not going to be moved.
Okay, we'll make it. I mean, we hope to be as useful as possible.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Or actually provide some feedback. So if part of what you're looking at is this question about like what renewables could you put onto current, is it like brownfields you're looking at, or is it looking at like retired plant, like you're looking at like Brandon Shores about to retire, you're looking at places that have retired, like what is that portion of the bill? Can you just, portion of the question, can you? I understand what you said about like, you look at, you know, Brandon Shores is this size, you could put this much in solar there, or this much in storage, that's cool, but I'm trying to, is it currently retired? Is it any brownfield? Is it places where we think there's interconnection?
That's a good question, and that's something that we actually would like to discuss. I mentioned before that this section will focus on itemizing the issues of physical versus economic obsolescence, and that's one of the issues that we'll be discussing there. For example, you cannot put it anywhere because interconnection costs can be large, right? So you would like to put it somewhere where it's already connected, or something was already connected, right? So we're going to take a holistic approach into it, and we will try to be careful here in what we promise. We definitely have a list of a handful of facilities. I don't have it open in front of my face, but Brandon Shores is on the list. I saw it. So yeah, it will be there.
So if I could just add one other thought on that, then I think it'll be really important. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think it'll be really important to highlight that, to continue to highlight in that section, that PJM still doesn't have a process and doesn't even have, in the 3 things they are planning to send up to FERC, still doesn't have a process for transfer of interconnection rights. So they have a couple of other things, the fast track, which could be beneficial, but isn't guaranteed to be beneficial in this scenario. They have, what else is in the set that they're sending? Anyways, the excess capacity, I think, is going to make it through, but they don't have the transfer of interconnection rights, which many of us have been advocating for. And the reason I think it's really important to talk about that is that we want everyone who's looking at this and saying, oh, perfect, we'll just send all the solar to Brandon Shores, to understand that that may or may not be a possibility, or that still could put it at the end of a 6-year queue, depending on whether it gets qualified as whatever their fast track process is. And so I'm sort of saying that because I want to continue to call out PJM and all of their flawed systems every opportunity we get, but also because I don't want colleagues of mine to say we don't need to put solar on any ag land because we can just put it all on these brownfields when that's not necessarily going to fast track it. And so I just think that context is really important. While ideally we would have those very easy transfers of interconnection rights, it's not a reality, and so that just needs to be part of that discussion.
Yeah, perfectly valid point of view, and we will incorporate it. Also, Delegate, I would like to highlight that Section 5 also will touch a little bit on those points, because we would like to provide estimates for example, like for the total availability for each of those technologies for solar, right? In addition to the brown, which we're going to be discussed in Section 4. So yeah, we're totally on board. There's going to be clear delineation between the brownfields and its total potential to have this technology deployed, and we'll discuss PGM, lack of PGM process.
What was the last sentence?
Can you repeat it, ma'am? You were breaking in.
You said we'll discuss.
What was the last sentence?
Process. Is that what you-
We will also discuss that PGM, I made a note to discuss that PGM doesn't have a process to transfer interconnection rights.
Yeah.
Senator Hester?
Thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to point out with respect to the fourth question, about previously developed project sites. Is that like only previously developed like generation sites, or like how are we defining project there? And the reason that I ask is because last year, the PPRP program at DNR, who I don't think is represented on this task force, but they went through and looked at like adding all of the state-owned land to the GG Plus tool. I'm not sure that's visible to the public at this point, but like it might be just interesting for you guys to extent that I mean, depending on how we define the previously developed project site, you do have a database of all state land by which agency owns it across the entire state. Does that make sense?
It's an interesting question for sure. I have to be honest, it was not part of our discussion, how it extends to all state land. Let me get back to the team, discuss that. If it is doable within the timeline allowed to us, I think we can take a look at it. Yeah.
I know you have a lot to do. So I'm not suggesting that you take all of the state land.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is that depending on how you define previously developed project site, you have a database available. You'd probably have to work with the PPRP team at DNR to get access to that database. But you could look across the state land and see all of the land that we do own and then zero in on the previously developed project site.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask Bridget in my office to do an introduction. I don't know, to somehow get the information to Andrew so that you can, and Andrew can pass it along to you guys, who's got that database of state land.
Ben, you're muted. I don't think he's muted.
Yeah, we're not hearing you, Ben.
Still can't hear you. Anyone wants to speak on this side? I just need a five.
I don't know if it's any helpful, but I constantly hear echo from the room when I talk with you guys.
Yeah, that's our fault. We can't really fix it. Yuri, sorry. Just the acoustics of the room.
Ben, I see you rejoin. Can you speak and see if we can hear you? Yeah, Ben, we can't hear you. Yeah, Ben, perhaps you could drop something into the chat or find a way to have Yuri communicate to us.
I cannot hear you, Ben, as well.
Calling on cell phone. Yeah, Ben, or perhaps you could call in.
Yeah, well,
Alright.
I don't know.
Yeah, bear with me for a second. We're trying to work on the technical challenge here.
Yeah, his mic. Yes, there we go. Let's try one more time.
Ben, can you try again?
Marty is not available.
It's not a park, that's for sure, but.
Ben's gonna type a comment. No, we're all doing it from my end. It doesn't matter if I'm muted anymore. I've muted Mustafa's, so it should be coming through my audio.
So we won't get.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yes.
All right, I think we've solved the reverberation problem here. And for those who are online, Ben is typing into the chat. We're heading back towards the 19th century in a hurry. And for those in the room, nutrition has arrived.
Yeah, we'll get the table set up. Oh, there's one over there. Yeah, you could move some stuff over. Oh, yeah, that's good. Well, I was only one.
Now take your time, Jared.
There you go, the Lord.
Stephanie, do you want to read the text?
Yes, Ben says, I worked with the PPRP in the 1970s. I'm building geographic databases on site suitability. It takes information on transmission, water, land availability, proximity to populations, etc. A big job which PPRP could undertake. And then Ben further says, but we are not in a position to compile all that data now. It is certainly worth doing to gain a realistic understanding of what could be developed.
So that
Alright, well,
wasn't what I was suggesting. I'm saying the PPRP has done this, and I'm just offering to connect you guys to the person who has the data in case it's of interest. That is all my comment was meant to say. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Senator. I think we will definitely take a look at what they did, and we will see how it could be useful in our work. I just feel what Ben is trying to say is that without us having a prior look at what has been done, it is very difficult for us to evaluate what could be done on this timescale, especially when, as Andrew pointed out, December 9 is the deadline that we must meet. So at this point, the most comfortable answer that I can give is to suggest that we will do our best to review the work that has been done. And thank you for authorizing your staff to make a connection. And as soon as we have access, we will take a look, and we will be able to be in a better position to tell you, Senator, what 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 could be done and how this information could extend this section of our report.
And Yuri, just a reminder, I mean, the obligation is to answer the question, so we can't dodge that.
We will answer the question. Thank you, Andrew, for reminding that.
Others on the committee? Well, we have a way forward. So thank you, Ben, and thank you, Yuri. I would caution that it perhaps might be valuable to get drafts out to the questions as you answer them. You know what you noted earlier about not wanting to get anything out so that it can't be sort of shot into holes in is a big risk, because you could easily turn up at December 9th and not have what the working group would consider sufficiently answered the questions. So I would just caution that you may want to, in all of our interests, share the drafts as it's developed.
Okay.
I just don't want to see any of us come to that December 9th date and find that the working group feels that the questions weren't answered.
We'll for sure to have more frequent updates with you and your team as soon as you feel comfortable sharing whatever we're showing with outsiders. We can adjust this time scale, but yeah, we'll be in regular contact with you, Andrew.
Yeah, and that would include all the working group members. But
Andrew, can I ask just a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So my understanding, the original deadline for this was supposed to be like end of last year, right? So it's already been extended once. What is the new official deadline for that? Is that the December 9th deadline that you worried about, or is that the end of the year?
yeah, if you're saying official, there's no statutory deadline. It's already been missed by a year.
Okay, and there was no
but-
official extension of that?
Yeah. No, there was just silence.
Understood.
But I think what we've done, and we've set in the contract, we set November 15th as the delivery for this study.
Yeah.
And because of the belief that it's behind schedule.
Yeah,
Yes,
Totally,
we've
totally
said, okay,
understand.
let's
I
do
just
it.
wanted to know if there was another force at play there. Yeah.
Other than just this working group's commitment that this gets done.
Understood.
And I think that after the November 9th, the process is that this gets delivered to the legislature and the governor's office. And with that in mind, I thought there was appropriateness of saying that's the end of the year. Then we're still getting it in this year. It has a 2024 date on it. So the December 9th was intended to give us enough time to then transmit it onto the legislature and the governor's office before the clock ticks midnight on the 31st. All right. It's 9:50. We've got a year ahead of us now. I mean, what I've been viewing is that this working groups have two pieces we worked through. We got recommendations to the Climate Commission, which they're still voting on. And we had this study to be delivered, and that's now, I won't say in the bag, but we know that it's been delivered in the weeks ahead of us here. So I wanted us to begin to look forward to the next year's work. This working group is going to continue. It doesn't sunset. And the legislature gave us an open book to opine and to develop whatever we want to do. So I want us to start to think about what that work group work plan looks going forward. We've talked about producing a white paper on energy planning. We've talked about doing a next iteration of working through this model to use it to illustrate scenarios, policy choices scenarios. And on that piece, I'm obligating myself, or I'll work through the Department of Environmental Protection, whatever it is here in Maryland. Yeah, no, I'm a Pennsylvania transplant, so I've spent 15, 20 years in that world. I never keep them straight, or PSCs or PUCs. To get the funding in place for that. I don't see that there's an impediment to do that, but that is a piece that has to be yet developed, and I'm taking that on to ensure that that is contracted, funds are in place, and we have a work plan for that piece. So the development, the scenario planning, to use the HOPE model to illustrate policy choices.
Jeff has a question.
Sorry, Jeff, question? Go ahead.
What 2024 energy resilience and efficiency working group recommendations to the Climate Commission passed on its last meeting? Most important is 1A.
Yeah, if I'm remembering 1A, I don't have it in front of me today, right, a second, but yeah, my recollection is 1A passed. Someone to pull it up, I can just double check it, but.
That is true. 1A was voted.
Yeah, Jared has informed us that 1A did pass.
The recommendation is.
What about the rest of them?
Yeah, Jared, do you want to give us an update on if you know what offhand?
Yeah, let me just pull up and I can read myself.
All right, Jared's pulling it up right now. Jared staffs the Climate Commission as well. Jared's taking a minute to pull it up.
So
You want to pass it? You want to pass it?
Of
between
course.
us?
Yep. So those are the remaining recommendations. Any ones that have passed will be at the bottom. Or will be passed, I should say. It was 1A.
Yeah, so 1A passed, and 1A is the Public Service Commission should issue a policy statement for the prioritization of battery storage and other demand response systems on the distribution grid, provided that they are cost effective in adding reliability to the grid and avoiding or delaying other capacity cost increases and or transmission upgrades. 1B has been tabled and for later consideration by the Climate Commission. 1B is, I'm reading the red line here, but the state should consider shifting the utility solar program from a REC-based subsidy model to a competitive bid similar to New Jersey, New York, and Illinois. Yeah. Jared, remind me, 2 was
2, I was tabled.
tabled.
Mhm.
All right, 2 has been tabled for consideration later in this term. This commission's term.
I believe that 2 was tabled for 2025.
All right, correction, it's
That's the one. So
number 2 is, I'll read it to you. In the longer term, the state needs an ongoing regular process for more holistic energy system assessments. So that's the planning one. And the commission tabled that for consideration into 2025. Number 3 has been tabled for consideration in this this working group, this commission session. Number 3 is In support of the state energy planning framework, Maryland must invest in a user-friendly, transparent model for statewide planning to inform policy and administrative decisions. So that was a discussion of further expanding the prototype of the HOPE model or something analogous to it. That's it, right, Jared?
And 4 passed that.
And
At
where's
the very
that?
bottom, it's separated from the current recommendations. Ones that are.
Okay, and recommendation 4 has passed. And if I'm reading Jared's computer properly, I'm not actually. Jared, do you want to
Yes.
check this? Because I'm looking, I'm on somebody else's. Don't worry about this stuff.
Yep, okay. Yeah, so recommendation 4 has passed. So that was included with the consent calendar.
Is that this working group?
I don't know. I don't know what you're looking at. Oh, that's a transition. Sorry, that's not the same one. Here it is. Energy Resilience 4, right there. It did pass.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah, Jared's narrative here has all the different working groups on. So we're on our working group now, this working group. Number 4 from us was the state should conduct the following immediate studies in parallel to the extent possible and building upon prior studies and existing information in order to support a long-term integrated approach to energy assessments and energy planning to meet the state's climate change goals. This was amended in the Climate Commission. There was a commissioner put forward a recommendation, and that recommendation was subsumed into our recommendation. So when we were talking about SMRs, small modular reactors, that commissioner's amended language came into ours and broadened it beyond just SMRs. And I will read to you that section of it, if I may. Yes, so the amendment to we had A, B, C, D, and E, 5 of them. The Climate Commission amended and expanded our B to read as follows. The Maryland Energy Administration should study the expansion and extension of our nuclear energy capabilities, particularly including, but not limited to, small modular reactors. A report on options should be made available to the state and public within the next 18 months. The report should include feasibility evaluations for the economic viability and deployment of new nuclear generation in the state, considering scenarios that include and exclude both ratepayer and taxpayer subsidies and guarantees. Specifically, in assessing feasibility, the study should analyze the experience over the past 25 years of conventional nuclear and SMRs, as well as any new progress, including timing, cost, and affordability. These studies should include and evaluate site adequacy, including at former fossil fuel plants, which was our language, and current nuclear plants, which was the expanded language. Availability of transmission assets and environmental justice impacts. Furthermore, the evaluation of impacts should include the overall employment and other benefits of new plant construction and operations. The study should incorporate public input and coordination with the Public Service Commission. So all our language was in there. Ours was narrowly focused on SMR siting on former fossil fuel plants. And then the amended language expands it into including existing nuclear, and then a recipe of items that should be considered: ratepayer impacts, taxpayer impacts, so on.
I think Senator Hester said, he'd like the document shared if possible.
Yeah, Senator Hester.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate the overview. I was just wondering if you could send the document that you were kind of reading from so we could read it. And then, I also think there's some value in our working group, publishing our full set of recommendations. Like, I don't think we report to the Climate Change Commission, do we?
Yeah, I think by statute we do. And we might read that as a must, not a limit. But I throw that out to the working group, whether, yeah, we're overstepping our mandate. But, yeah, that was kind of that was sort of what was in, why we thought of going down an avenue of producing a white paper, was to have our own line of communication.
I think
to the
that's super,
legislature.
I think that's super important because we're looking at this through a slightly different, like, it's aligned to the climate, you know, we're aligned to our climate goals, but we also have a specific, you know, focus on resiliency. And so I think that just because the Climate Change Commission tabled something, doesn't mean that it's like not a good idea. And so I think getting all of our ideas out there in advance of the session, whether it's, you know, through the white paper or some other way, I still think it's valuable. We've done a lot of hard work this far, and I think we should be proud of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would make the, you know, what's the working group's intent? What's the working group's desire? Yeah, we might get our hands slapped by the Climate Commission, but I don't know, what do we care?
Well, what would that look like, right? Because one of the things that's tabled, I'm just gonna introduce it as a bill, so it doesn't, I mean, it's gonna be out there. What would be I'm not opposed to it, but like, what would that look like? We would just post something on the website, or we'd be like, this is what we recommended and commission tabled it. I'm not sure what the sort of mechanism would be. Like, I hear what you're saying about we want to continue the conversation. We want to make sure the world knows that these are other ideas that could add to resilience. I mean, there's a value to that, I guess, but I'm just not sure what the mechanism would be, given that we sort of are attached to the commission and we're under MDE, I think, as best as I can tell. So
Yeah, we're not under MD,
we're not under MDE. What are we under?
the Climate Commission,
Staffing,
staffed by MD, but not part of MD.
but we're under the climate.
Yes, Climate Commission is independent commission.
But that's, the statute puts us under the commission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a working group created by the Climate Solutions Now Act.
Yeah.
This working group was created as a working group of the
Okay.
Climate Commission.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't know, just to jump in here, I mean, I don't see any impediment to publishing our full recommendations on the working group website.
They are already, I believe. If you go into the meeting materials from 9/10/24, it has final recommendations. Yeah, at least that's what we're talking about. Well, they changed slightly since then because of the commission process. We did post those awards.
But, yeah, but there's no hesitancy to do the unamended too.
We can post whatever we want.
As in anything that was tabled or anything else or voted down or whatever else. Yeah. We can still post that this is what we did unadulterated. And Senator Hester, would that suffice, or is that not, to Delegate Charcudian's point, is that so buried deep in the weeds that it's not really communicated?
I mean, I did not know it was there. But now that I do, it's fine. I mean, it's, what was the date again? The 10/24 meeting?
9/10/24.
9/10/20, that's fine. I don't really care anymore.
Ouch, Senator. Yeah, I mean, we could write a letter to all the members of the legislature, but Senator, you're good? You think that's, they're seeing the light of day?
It doesn't seem like anybody else really cares, so I will wait. I will go to 9/10/24 and find the publication. That's completely fine.
Um, I'm just noting that both you and Delegate Charcuti, and you serve on the committees that this would be germane to, right?
Yes, we do. Why the stuff we really care about, we can just introduce.
Exactly.
I mean, it's preferable to have the commission supportive of it, but, you know, yeah.
Yeah. I think if there's value in this stuff, the audience is always being, I mean, yes, we have to filter this through the Climate Commission and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but at least that's the way statute sort of says that we funnel things, recommendations through to the Climate Commission and they vote them up or down or amend them as they see fit to appear in their annual report, which goes to the legislature and the governor.
Every member studies and memorizes, right?
Yes, and so yeah, as I'm parochially interested in this working group. I want this working group's material to be tacked to the church door, quoting Martin Luther. Martin Luther. All right. And Senator, also, if your committee wants to invite anybody from this working group to testify at a hearing, why not?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, Andrew.
And goes for the House of Delegates as well. I mean, if you really want to, get this stuff out, get visible.
I think the recommendations are good, and I appreciate, Senator, your point about the work that we put into it. I also think, some of the most valuable outcomes will be if we can get this model to be something that we believe kind of represents questions that we're asking and assumptions that make sense. I think that's probably going to be actually the most valuable in driving policy, because I think there's in a lot of the recommendations we have, many of us can move forward with or without them being tied to the commission or this group. And I think a lot of the discussion and the report, we'll learn from. But I think many of us who are in positions to influence outcomes have real questions about things that the model could potentially give us answers to. And I think that'll, with a lot of caution, because I think it could be, we could get it wrong and that could be dangerous. I think I've said that enough times, but I can't stress it enough. But if we get it right, I think that could be really helpful to make some really hard decisions that are in front of us for the next couple of years. So I think doubling down on, as soon as we get through whatever our December 9th is, really focusing. I think where we started was, your question was, what do we do next year? That's where we started this conversation. And I think that's really getting that model right is huge. And I think that could be really, really helpful to the state. Because we are facing challenges, technical challenges, financial challenges that'll likely be exacerbated with a new administration in Washington. And so the hard choices that'll have to get made, the more of that kind of data we have, I think the more helpful it'll be.
And partly because it's not in my DNA to be a shrinking violet. I want this working group's word to be out there. Yes, it was established as a subsidiary to the commission, and yes, the processes of these recommendations going forward, working their way up through this process and to the commission for inclusion in an annual report, etc. but I really don't. I mean, I was a little hesitant when I spoke earlier, but I really don't like being handcuffed. That's the only avenue. And I don't think that was, if I think the legislative intent of creating this working group was not intended to be handcuffed to limited to just proposing recommendations for the inclusion in the climate change report. I think we've got gravitas or we've got agency, and no small measure because of what the legislature put in to the membership of this working group. This was intended to be a brain trust of the diverse interests in this answering these questions about reliability writ large. And I think it would be a disservice to legislative intent if we only produced once a year some recommendations that go filter through to an annual report of the Climate Change Commission. I think I would say we have a voice beyond that. And I think we'd be failing to meet the intent of the legislation if we didn't have an expansive view of what thought pieces this body puts forward.
So are you asking, I agree with everything you said, but are you asking us for something else other than we're gonna focus on the model? You wanna like,
No,
ask
no,
other
I-
questions, or you're just kind of generally saying,
Yeah, no, I'm generally saying, yeah, in this,
let's keep doing good work?
and to Senator Hester's point, in getting it out there, having it that we're not just bound to this narrow lane of once a year recommendations that may or may not filter through the Climate Commission to their final report. And I would also note that just ancillarily, the language that I read out has passed, and Jared may correct me if I'm misstating, is my understanding of the process at the Climate Commission is they're going through this whole voting process and all these working group recommendations. There's a whole bevy of them, 30 or 40 of them from eight working groups.
Only 7 are provided.
Okay, yes. And then
Because we're not that.
yeah, folks with their head in the sand. And they will go through this voting process as we've done, amending and so on. And then the last meeting of the year, they will come back and take another bite at apple and saying, is everybody good with what we voted, correct? They'll do a final vote. These are preliminary votes.
Yeah, so the way the process works is, as Andrew described, go through the recommendation process we have already, and then once all of the recommendations have either passed or not approved, they will be put into the annual report, which NDE assembles. Then the commission approves that annual report, and that's their way of saying, we sign off on all of these recommendations of the document that they're.
So just a caution that this may not be the language that does finally appear, or these may end up on the cutting room floor and not in the final report. So, but I will inform the committee, this working group, when that final vote is taken and confirm that all of these went through and were or were not further amended.
Once they're passed by the commission, then they are passed, and it will be another chance after that.
And but what's that date?
That they're going to be approved. Well, technically, we could approve them at the November 19th meeting, but I think it's much more likely that that's going to happen in the December 10th virtual meeting.
Yeah, and I would say, I've been reading the tea leaves, I think that's accurate, that on December 10th is when we will know, have signed in blood what is made it into the final report, the annual report. Okay. So to Delegate Charcudian's point, doing good work. We have right now before us that we are producing this white paper, which I'm going to have to take the lead on, with all of your guidance. We don't have, there's nothing contractually through UMD, or through Johns Hopkins to write to help us author that. So that's a empty bucket. And there isn't staff support from Maryland's Department of the Environment to staff it. So that means, all right, who's going to be stepped up? So I think I'm volunteering. I'm going to have to have the pen on that one.
That's, sorry, that's the white paper on energy, an
Planning.
energy plan?
Yes.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
So, okay. And what was the time frame on that one?
We said January 2025. I think the intent was that it then informs the legislative process.
And it was talk about NREL potentially helping with some of that?
And Senator Hester, I've been tracking the back and forth with NREL and the PSC. What's been asked of NREL was to, in some ways, do what we're thinking about in this white paper. I'm doing an analysis of IRPs and energy planning more generally. Is that right?
I think so. Ben Baker has the latest draft. They were asked to provide, guidance on how other states are doing energy planning and integrated resource planning, and how they actually then have teeth to those processes in a state that has been deregulated. I don't know if we ever really fully talked about what was going to go into the white paper, so I can't really compare what is in what.
Yeah. And my recollection was that's essentially or exactly what we were thinking about for the white paper.
I mean, there's a wide variety of people here, like on the call, besides you, me, and Delegate Cherkoudian. I mean, I just wonder what, if that's like general agreement, like before you spend a whole lot of your like personal time, Andrew, writing this white paper. I just wonder if we should get like a gut check on what the general, if everybody agrees that is the general consensus of the white paper. I mean, hopefully it is, but I just, my memory doesn't go back that far.
Other working group members, Delegate Cherkoudian?
I think she was just saying that maybe the three of us are having this conversation and I should stop talking and let other people, I have thoughts, but let's let other people talk first.
Yeah, I think that was my understanding of the white paper as well. Sounds like Senator Yu and Andrew are in agreement as to what the basic outline of that document would be. And I don't disagree. I think it's a solid approach.
I think the biggest problem is, as one of a handful of people who actually reads all the reports that comes to us, I think we have a lot of plans written down, and I think we have a lot of reports, and I think a lot of them are actually really good. I guess if I had the ability to wave a wand and produce a paper on energy planning that I thought would be useful to us as a legislature or from a policy making perspective, I would say what I would want to understand from the other states is what are the plans that really end up influencing policy and what are the mechanisms? So I think it's really hard, like it's really clear how an integrated resource plan in a vertically integrated state works. Not that it's perfect, and of course there's, advantages and disadvantages of the different models of regulation, but I understand how you go from having an integrated resource plan to rate making to the establishment of generation facilities. Like I could see that connection. I don't understand. I actually don't understand the mechanism. So I understand that there's states who probably write things down that look really good. And then they may or may not have policies that help support getting to that. I don't understand how there are states, especially states in PJM, that have something written down and mechanisms in place that allow state policy to drive resource adequacy. Like I understand that there's state policies related to permitting. I understand the state policies related to RPS, related to ZEX, related to all this stuff that can influence that. But the actual connection between state policy, state regulations, state bodies, and resource adequacy in a PJM state, I'm not sure that I understand what those mechanisms are. And I think that would be really, really groundbreaking to be able to say, I mean, maybe we look at New York and say which pieces of what they have there. I mean, they're so special in all their ways.
Yeah.
But like, what is there anything in there that we could do that could apply in a PJM state? Like, what is it about? Because I worry about having another report that says, like, here's some examples of good energy plans that are out there that don't actually make this connection that we need to be able to make in policy between the bodies we have, like the regulatory bodies we have, the agencies we have, and an actual outcome on the ground. And I don't know how to get from here to there, but I feel like that's the disconnect. And I worry about you putting in time, about NREL, about everybody putting in more time for a white paper that doesn't answer that question. And if we need a power authority, or if we need a NYSERDA, or we need again, that's not PJM, so they get that bonus as well, that they don't have to operate within PJM. But if what we're going to come out with is something that might take us 5 years to get to, because it's establishing a new authority or body or something in the state, like, it would be more valuable to take the time to know that answer. Like, that's actually the only way to do it, so let's start working towards that body. That would be more valuable to know than to have in a month a paper that sort of highlights, like, here's what California does, Minnesota has something interesting on GETS, and New York does this because they don't have the handcuffs of PJM. So for what it's worth, I think I just want to put that out as the challenge that I think we have. And I want to be really careful with your precious time, with everyone's precious time, and whatever we do, we ought to make sure it's really useful and not just another document. So
Yeah, and I think, so the lit review is the first shoe to drop, but you're right. I mean, that lit review should be what then says, all right, what pieces are missing? And yeah, what California does, it's not vertically integrated, it's restructured, but it's single state ISO. New York is the same way.
it turns out everybody who doesn't have to
and
do
so-
PJM, so
Yeah.
it's off, and those that do can't, right? Like,
But
that's an
then,
interesting outcome.
but then do we say, all right, now here's the Maryland situation. We're within an integrated ISO, multi-state ISO. How do we solve that nut? Can we build, or what would need to be built to enable actionable resource adequacy for the state of Maryland, given that they're within this framework? Is that an impediment? Is that can we not get around the challenge that Maryland's within an integrated ISO, and the ISO has control of all this, and Maryland doesn't have agency? I hope that's not the outcome, but that's answering that question. And what is, I think, if I'm following you, is what pieces, what processes need to be in place, what policies need to be in place to fill that gap of the differentiation between single state ISO, New York, California, and a Maryland in an integrated ISO. Isn't that really fundamentally what the white paper is intended to answer? Or should?
Yeah, or
We
so,
need to do the lit review to know what's out there, what possible mechanisms or worlds are out there. But that has to be then, okay, well, how is Maryland distinct? And how do we build systems? What systems need to be built to square the circle?
Yeah. Okay.
Senator Hester?
Well, I mean, Laura and I have obviously been talking, and this was kind of the direction that my team was doing some research, on. So I would definitely support us moving in that direction. I do think it's important that we have, I don't know, there's a lot of, it would be hugely beneficial if like the various, all the various players, like, the PSC, the MEA, MDE, the policy committees in the legislature have been working on this issue for a long time. Like if we could come to, if we could work, together towards one of these long-term goals. One of my fears is that there's going to be a lot of direct policy suggestions this year, and we don't have the framework to put all the pieces together. So, I mean, I've said kind of a couple times, I'm working on an energy planning bill. And I mean, I think Laura just outlined, part of the research that really needs to happen. So I guess I'm in agreement. And it would be wonderful if there was, a work product. Timeline wise, I don't know when we get the kind of lit review back from NREL, and how that feeds into a white paper. It just seems like it's the middle of November. And so trying to get something beyond the NREL study done by the beginning of the session seems like an ambitious goal.
It might be. But my response might be, I'd still like to try.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
not gonna stop you. If you want to go write that paper, I mean, that's great. I'm just trying to make sure we're coordinating all the.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to wait for the white paper to write a bill.
No.
So hopefully we'll all come out in the same place.
Yeah.
When do
But
we
your
look-
bill might inform the white paper.
Well, that's
Since you happen to be, you happen to be on this work group.
right. Okay, well, I think we should talk offline. I do think we have a problem with this working group, and that there's a number of industry and other participants on the working group. And it feels like the majority of the people having this conversation are you, me, and the delegate. And I think we are missing a trick to pull in the expertise of the other brilliant people on the call. So we've got to figure out how to do that. And if we are writing a white paper, just like with the recommendations, we really should be making sure that we do use not only the members of the working group who are brilliant, but there's some brilliant people who are not on the working group. And I just don't want us to get to the same point we are with the study, where there's a draft of the model, which nobody agrees with. So I think we got to think just a little tiny bit about how we can support you, Andrew, as you take the pen on behalf of a diverse group of folks.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so we're marching. I collectively, we'll march forward in this. And yeah, we'll talk offline. We'll talk bilaterally. Whether vinegar, honey, or whatever it is to get people to contribute. That's yet to be determined whether we can crack that nut. But let's, if maybe the only answer here is that, I'm gonna be focused on getting this done. And to your point, ensuring that we're getting input from the brain trust within this working group, as well as the brain trusts outside, the PSCs of the world, or the MEAs of the world, or even though MEA is on this commission, the working group, PPRP, all those disparate pieces. Any working group members have comments or considerations they'd like to put forward here before we run out of time?
I just got the email about.
I'm sorry?
I just got the email.
Yeah, Jared sent around the,
So 1A didn't pass. That was tabled.
1A did pass, but 1B did not. So we've left that.
I got you.
It
Okay.
should be all in one place until.
Understood. Okay. Sorry. Got it.
all right. All right. All right, we've worked through our agenda items for today. We have a good way forward. If there's members of the public online here, if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Jeff Silva, floor is yours. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. You're muted. Mr. Silva, you're still showing muted at our end.
Jeff did put a question in the chat a while ago. Maybe when he's attending that.
Yeah, if I'm gonna have to try to interpret what you intended here, Mr. Silva. We're not hearing you, but I think at least one, you have comments in the chat, and I will read them just for the record. And so anybody else who's not looking at the chat, if someone's on the phone, for example, I will attempt to read it from the room here. So one of your comments, Mr. Silva, was also consumer protection by PSC. If a third-party aggregator sells 100% solar or wind-produced electricity contract to the public, the contract's customer should have regulators back/enforce verification of electricity sources to the customer directly from the regulator to assure the clean energy goal is achieved. Can EREWG bring that issue to Maryland Gov?
Answer that. I mean, I feel like that was the issue. SB 1 last year really sort of took care of that by requiring that the purchases that they purchase those RECs from the PJM region. So to the extent that PJM RECs are sort of the same RECs that we use for our current RPS, now those 100% clean products have to be consistent with the products and the rules that we have for our RPS. Now, there's people who don't agree with all the rules we have for the RPS, but those products are regulated in the same way now, that the RECs that they use in the same way as the RPS and the rest of the standards that the utilities are held to. But I don't think that that's still an open issue. If you want to type in there, if you think there's something missing in that, I mean, to the extent we need to clean up the RPS, I will agree with that point. But those third-party suppliers are held now to the same REC purchase requirements as the current utilities are.
And Mr. Silver, you'd also asked the question of whether 1A had passed. Yes, to confirm 1A is currently provisionally passed.
Yeah, I might offer just some context to that. So although 1A has passed, it doesn't mean that that will be in the annual report. Once 1B is reviewed, we'll still have possession of the recommendation as a whole. So if that vote doesn't pass, and even though we did already vote on 1A, the recommendation. So you will.
My head would explode if that.
I'm sure.
And I am in the room for these votes, and I present the recommendation, and I engage in the back and forth with the commission journeys. So our voice is there. Any other comments to be made? Seeing none and no further comments for the working group, this meeting is adjourned and look forward to our next meeting, which is in January. Jared is pulling the data for us.
We have a meeting scheduled for December 10th. Do we want to go ahead and cancel that?
No, sorry, I knew we had a gap at the end of the year, but yeah, December 10th is here and I think January is not. But anyway, regardless, December 10th is our next meeting, virtually. I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you very much. And,